Hello there, it's me, Rama, and this is one thing I have always wanted, which is the ability to turn a dynamic mesh into a static mesh asset. First of all, I always wanted the dynamic mesh system that's in UE5, where you can easily create new meshes, but I noted there's not an easy way to create a static mesh asset from something like if you create this dynamic mesh in your construction script, for example, and you have this whole setup that you've created. Here I'm using a spline component to create this fun little effect we have of it's my little demonstration here. So this is actually a spline. I'll show you more about that in a second. Show you how the code works. Basically, every time the construction script runs, you reset the dynamic mesh, otherwise it keeps adding to itself. And then for the final asset, you can use if you have a more complicated mesh from a static mesh. This is like 1,000,000 triangles, so I have a switch, so I'm not always using it. And then I'm appending a box as the test mesh that's of the same dimensions as the more complicated mesh, like your high definition mesh. And here now is the code for the spline, and it's not that complicated. It's every time you take an interval along the spline with a granularity that you can control here, then I'm simply adding a cylinder that I rotate so it's along the axis of the spline. Not that complicated, but the one complicated part, strangely complicated, is you have to convert the spline to world space so that it works properly with the dynamic mesh system. The dynamic mesh transform space and the spline space, your actor space, all those ones have to relate to each other. So the solution is to get the spline in local, right? Not the options are local and world. Get it locally, local to the spline. Then take spline, which is your local, get the relative transform, which is of course relative to the world, right? The component list, which I just closed. So it's your actual, you want to be relative to your world. You don't want to be, let's go get our viewport. Let's go get our components page back. All right. So here you see the spline, right? And it's beneath the component, which is beneath the actor, and they're all attached to each other. So to get your dynamic mesh to work properly in the level viewport, not be sliding all over the place, for example with a spline, but it happens in other cases as well, make sure you convert to the proper space before passing it over to your append cylinder. This is of course a dynamic mesh action. But to get everything all coordinated properly, again in the case of a spline, local to spline, relative, because relative means relative to the actor or the parent component, which is relative to the actor, which means when you move it around in the viewport, everything will stay together instead of getting pieced apart. So if you're having lots of fun creating things with the dynamic mesh system with a pen cylinder and a pen box and all that, and all of a sudden you put it in the level viewport and you can't find it anymore, it's because it's probably the transform spaces were set up not considering the relative transform, which means relative to wherever you move it, and you're not going to be able to find it, or it'll be somewhere, you look around your viewport, you'll find it eventually. So here's the conversion operation. Get relative transform. The transform performs the action of transforming a location, right? It's the orange thing doing it, and it's transforming the spline now into relative space, not world space, and not local. Relative, right? The reason it's not an option here is because relative to what? It's not defined yet. You have to do that because it's not defined until you say relative to what, which in this case is the spline component, and you're gonna then pass that, which is relative over here, to these things, and you're gonna pass that into your dynamic mesh system to create the proper result. So that's the code. That's not the critical part about this plugin though. Here's the really fun part about the plugin, new code, Victory plugin, new code, which is, look, now this could become a permanent asset and then forever be part of your game. It is, however, editor only. That's for legal reasons more so than for, technical reasons. The idea is that you're supposed to use the UE editor, not recreate the editor in a packaged game. You want to use the UE editor, but the assets that you create can be used in any game project in a packaged build, like any other static mesh asset. It is a real static mesh asset, which I pass out to you here. I don't use it here because that wasn't my specific use case, but I do give you lots of info about whether it worked or not. The way you call it is with a call an editor event, and now I'll show you how it works in action. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off final build, because this is a 3D mesh cutout, or it's actually an extrusion that I cut out all the way, and so you can see through to the other side, because that's how long piece has to last all the way through. And I'm going to now turn that off, so now I have a version I can move around. So what I meant about the relative space, see how it moves with it, and it's kind of sluggish in movement because it's recalculating every time, which I'm now going to use to my advantage, because the great thing about the dynamic mesh system is now you can compose in your level viewport. The great thing about the whole modeling system is that you can now compose in your level viewport directly, so everything is absolutely tailored to your game world in a way that can never be done if you have to have your mesh, your static mesh assets created in a separate program. Now, the great thing about the dynamic mesh tool I've made here, which I include with the plugin, let me show you where it's located. If you go into your Victory plugin, you'll see it right here, dynamic mesh, fancy long name, right? And all the assets that you need are there. So now, because it is dynamic, I can do this, right? I can move this. So I'm going to add another point, which is you hold control and then you click on the point. Hold on one second here. And I hold control, right? Now I've created a new one, right? So it's growing, or spline is growing, and I'm going to take this one, move it down, create a new point, right? So wind it through. Now again, this is, you know, your level geometry, your world, right? Now the reason I'm doing this is because the great news, the whole point of this plugin is you can, everything you're looking at, you know you're going to be able to turn into a static mesh asset, so it's actually efficient, but with the dynamic mesh you can customize in your level viewport. Essentially you have your modeling program in engine, in level viewport for level specific static mesh creation that can be relatively fancy. This of course is my quick example, but you could do much fancier things. So and then we're going to turn it into a static mesh asset in a second. Alright, so let's say that, you know, this is all tailored to your specific level. It's precise now. Isn't it fun? I love splines. Alright, and we're going to stick that in the ground. We can say this is now firmly rooted. World peace has happened. We're firmly rooted. Let's make sure we're in the pink square. Alright, pink for victory. Alright, so now let's take our tangent thing here, tangent control, see if I can do anything with that. You can see how it actually works when I take it too far to either side, right? Because it starts to get a little granulated. Let's move this one out. Now, again, for a level designer, this is heaven, because you're essentially making what could be a root system, it could be piping, it could be any number of things. And again, this is just one example with dynamic mesh, but you could never do this, because we're going to turn it into a static mesh in a second, but you could never do this in 3ds Max or Maya and have everything as contextualized, because, again, in a more complex level environment, let's say the thing in the sky influences your creative mind, and you're like, well, because that thing in the sky is there, and I'm making this new static mesh asset in a second, with this fun little button right here, okay, well, my artistic sense is telling me to avoid blocking the view from this angle, because maybe here's where the entrance corridor is. I need to move this over to the side. You wouldn't be thinking that way if you were doing this in Maya or in 3ds Max, or, you know, Blender. You can't see, right? So that's the huge advantage, is you can contextualize everything. So at the right angle, you can see the loopy thing, you can see the sphere on one side and the big thing in the sky on the other, and the loop is right there, because here's where the door is, right? Everything can be perfectly contextualized. One problem. Watch what happens when I hit Asset Final World Piece, which brings it to its full form. huge hang, right? Because the full mesh is about 1,000,000 triangles, because again, it's a cutout. It's actually an extrusion, sorry, what is displacement? It's a displacement, and that's why all the letters can individually sparkle. Gotta have individual world piece sparkles, right? Which means every time I move, you get a different arrangement of sparkles. It's critical. You gotta, and that's why I have the 1,000,000 triangles, so you can have per angle of view sparkle arrangements. So you could be like, here, now I want the see the sparkles in the colon, but I want the sparkle now I want 3 sparkles in the U. Okay, alright, I think you get the idea. Sparkles only happen when it's fully 3D. If this was just a texture, you wouldn't get no sparkles. Just keep that in mind. Alright, so now you've perfectly contextualized your mesh to your game environment because of the awesomeness of dynamic meshes. The one problem being that every time you load the game, it's going to do that hang you just saw, and it's going to take a really long time to do anything as soon as you have more than one of these in your level, because that was like a 1-second hang. It's unviable once you've finalized your arrangement. You know, and you could do this in game and save it, I think, but the real use case that I'm giving to you is, of course, in editor builds, in the level viewport, to perfectly tailor your mesh to your scene like you just saw, and ground it into the world, not just its own little space. And now, for super efficient packaged game loading and saving, I introduced to you the happy button. Alright, let's clear our status log. You can pick the location to be anywhere you want. It's doing a long hang because it considers this need to update the construction script. You could add as many directories here as you want. Make sure you use that / not the other one. And then you can pick any asset name you want. Don't need to add .u asset, or you could have no folder and then it'll just appear in your content folder. So it's wherever you want inside of your content folder. Please note, it's something I do for you. Again, every edit now triggers a full construction script to rebuild, which means hangs. But please note, there is inside of content, there is no folder called Victory. I create that for you using my very first pull request to the Unreal 4 engine, which was create directory tree, which is now part of the engine. You can use it anytime you want, and I use that to make sure that your folder is created. So you can type whatever you want here, as many folders as you want. Yeah, I'm not going to add any more. I think I actually deleted my / that would have produced a very interesting result. So let's say Victory Harmony / right? You could add as much as you want here, and I'll create the directory tree for you, and then the asset name. And then when you're all done and you finalized your mesh and you're ready for the production version, the static mesh asset, here it is. Ready? Click! Of course nothing happens for a little while because of the exact reason that we need to make it a static mesh asset in the first place, which it takes a really long time to calculate and build. And in a package game, that would be a huge hang every time a level loads. But not as soon as this finishes getting created. You are now witnessing UE5 modeling program. UE5 is now is a full-on modeling program. I give you some status here. I say your outcome, and I give you the asset location, which happens to be here for my project. Now, I'm going to turn this back off, just so I don't, actually I'll leave it. Well, I'm going to put the static mesh asset here in a second. So let's just click away, and here, look, Victory. Folder now exists, Harmony now exists. Let's save it, alright? And let's see how it went as soon as I finish saving. Alright, so here we have still the dynamic version, which you can edit and move around to your heart's content to finalize your level segment that has this dynamic mesh in it. But when you're ready for the package build, let's bring in our static version, which we can't edit, but we can move around really easily and quickly. I'm going to turn off navigation mesh here, so it can't affect the nav mesh anymore, so I can move it really fast. Right? Rotate it. Now let's, to bring it into its final position, copy location, and paste. Well, first I'll delete this because I don't need it anymore. This is again when you're finalizing your level, and so the load times are really fast in your level. And now you have, I think this was like 41. Now you have the fully tailored to your game, perfectly created static mesh asset. Everything just where you want it to be, contextualized for your final game storyline and subtle details of the lighting, for example, right? Because everything matters to the artist heart, right? You want everything just right, and now you can do that and have the efficiency of a static mesh. You create it in the UE editor, and then it ships with your packaged game. So welcome to UE5 Modeling Suite, which you already know about. Right, you already know about the modeling tools, but now you can create your own modeling tools using the Victory plugin, because you, in your construction script, use the dynamic mesh modeling tool set that they gave you, and you create your various, you append your cylinders and whatever, or create from static meshes, right? Copy here, and then, you know, modify. You can use displacement grid, all sorts of things, all in the construction script, so you can completely tweak in your level viewport. And then when you're ready, use this node, which I'm giving you, so that you're, because this is essentially just a dynamic mesh actor, so you can finalize your mesh, move around freely, and have ultra fast loading times. Alright, and we're done. You've now witnessed a full build cycle for a dynamic mesh turned into a static mesh using Victory plugin. Alright, can I get up? Ah, you know I can do it. Can I do it on camera is the question. Aha! I gotta back up a little. I'm hitting the top of the box. You know what I'm trying to do. Come on. I think I'm a platformer at heart. Can I? I'm so close. I could almost get up. Hey, what if I could use the easy route and climb up the new thing that we made? This is the part that we did together. It's more romantic. Alright, here we go. Okay. I'm satisfied. Almost. I could go higher. Alright. I'm making progress. Oh, the joy of spline component. Oh, can't get higher. Gotta jump. I did it! I'm at the top! And I did it on camera, too. So, there you have it. Now you can create any mesh you want using the tools that you create yourselves, your own modeling tools. And your own modeling tool logic combined with dynamic mesh system of UE5 combined with Victory plugin means you can create any mesh you want in your level viewport. Enjoy! World peace!